Last year, we trekked the Mardi Himal Trail in the Annapurna region of the Himalayas in Nepal. This 50-kilometre trek has around 3,000 metres of elevation gain and takes most people around 4 to 5 days to complete. This is exactly what our trek looked like, starting in the city of Pokhara on day 1 and spending the next 5 days hiking next to some of the tallest mountains on the planet. Day 1 starts in Pokhara, the nearest city to the Mardi Himal trek and the gateway to the Annapurna region. We checked out of our hotel in the lakeside area of Pokhara and hopped in a taxi to where we were told we would be able to get a shared jeep up to the town of Landruk to start our trek. After arriving in this area, we realised we were the only tourists here and getting a shared jeep would not be possible. Our plan B was to get either a taxi or try and get the bus to the town of Kande, where we could also start the Mardi Himal trek.
This is proving more difficult than we thought it would be. Shared taxis are not a thing because there's not enough people to share a taxi. So they want 9,000, which is like £55 to get to where we want to go, which we're not willing to pay because there's a bus that goes there. So now we're going to probably have to start a day before we want to and go to Kandy. So then we've got like an extra 16-kilometre trek to do today.
Starting the trek here would mean an extra day of walking, but it was on the main road outside of Pokhara, which meant that we could get a bus or just a regular taxi and wouldn't need to get a jeep. We did spend a little while trying to get the bus, but we couldn't find the right bus, and after around an hour of waiting and asking every single bus that went past if it was going to Kande, we ended up relenting and got a taxi, which cost us 2,000 rupees to get to Kande.
I had to come up with a new solution as there was no shared jeep. Taxi to Kande, 2,000 instead of 9.
The taxi ride took around 40 minutes and the driver knew exactly where to drop us off in the town to start the trek.
So we've just arrived at Kandy. Our plan is to go to Australia Camp, which is apparently an hour and a half according to that sign. Then we're going to get some breakfast and then figure out what we're going to do next. We're going to re-get the map out because we're going a different route to what we thought. We don't know if we're going to have to veer back off and then come back or if we can basically cut off Ladruk altogether. So yeah, hour and a half, walk to Australia Camp, get some breakfast, look at the map. That's the plan for now.
So the walk up to Australia Camp did take us around 1 hour and 30 minutes, just like the sign said. The walk starts off quite steep. It starts as a stone path going through the town of Kande and up towards Australia Camp, and it soon turns into some steep steps. So it does take around an hour and a half, despite the fact you can see Australia Camp from Kande and it doesn't look that far, but it's really, really steep. We were pretty unfit, as you can see, when we did this hike, but we didn't really struggle too much. However, we do have a lot of experience hiking with heavy bags and hiking at altitude, so that definitely helped us out. I would say if you have medium fitness though, you're definitely capable of doing this trek. The trail is very well signposted and it's almost impossible to come off of the trail as long as you pay attention to the hundreds of signs that are along the trail. We stopped at Australia Camp for some lunch. We both ordered vegetable noodles, which cost us 400 rupees each. There is a nice big open garden with lots of chairs and tables to enjoy your lunch here. So we sat and enjoyed our noodles in the sunshine. Australia Camp is also a guest house. So if you get a late start on day 1, there is definitely the option of spending the night here if you needed to.
These noodles are really good.
After our delicious lunch, we picked up our bags and we headed back on the trail to carry on with our day.
Let's go.
Again, it's still very well signposted the whole way along, so you're always sure you're going in the right direction. The trail is mostly flat from Australia Camp, so it's a nice change of pace from the beginning of the day. This part of the trek has a few different towns along the way, which all have numerous guest houses or tea houses that you can both eat at and sleep at. A lot of these towns aren't on the map though, so it's good to know there is a few different options if you get a late start in the day. And depending on your walking speed or how far you want to go, there is so many options on places to stay, places to eat. There's hundreds of towns along this section.
It took us 30 minutes, if that, from where we had lunch to get to this next town. It's so cute. So if you start late, I definitely recommend staying here. It takes you a long time to get to the trailhead or something. This is definitely really cute. Loads of little tea houses, little gardens. Everyone's really, really friendly and namasteing us. So cute.
We actually didn't know how far we were planning on getting. On day 1, we were just planning on walking as far as we could, and then once we get tired, stopping. We did stop and get a ginger tea each at this little restaurant in this town called Pitam Durali. I think I'm saying that right. This was maybe an hour and a half walk from where we ended up stopping for the evening. The walk from here was slightly uphill and through thick rainforest with lots of mossy trees and tons of ferns all along the trail. After around 2 hours or less, we reached this guest house called Hotel Greenview, where we decided we would end up spending the night. This guest house wasn't really in a town, it was just kind of 2 guest houses next to each other on either side of the trail, and we just chose this one at random. We just picked the one on the left. We spent most of our evening in the dining room of this tea house just because there is a wood-burning heater in the dining room, which makes it much more comfortable than our own room, as the temperature does drop a lot in the evening. And there's only around 5 rooms at this guest house, but we are actually the only people staying here. There was also this really friendly cat in the dining room, which made it much more enjoyable. Our room for the night cost us 500 rupees with the condition that we ate breakfast and dinner at this guest house. Much like most other tea houses in Nepal, the room was very basic and just contained 3 beds with some blankets. These rooms don't generally come with any bedding, so we carried sleeping bags with us on the trek. Like this room, some of the rooms come with blankets, but without a sleeping bag, it does get really cold at night. The blankets don't get cleaned in between uses either, so it's definitely better to have your own sleeping bag that you know is clean. There is also not usually any electricity at any of the guest houses, so we brought along a power bank to charge our phones and the camera. It's definitely very basic facilities along the Mardi Himal trek, and a lot of the toilets are squat toilets with just a bucket flush. We've travelled in and throughout Asia a lot, so this wasn't a huge surprise to us, but I guess some people would be shocked to see that there isn't actually many Western toilets along this trail. Unfortunately, the weather wasn't particularly great whilst we stayed at this hotel, so there wasn't any views. I imagine that on a clear day, the views are amazing, looking down over the rice terraces and the town below into the foothills. But unfortunately, no such luck today. For dinner, I ordered a dal bhat, which is a local dish that consists of a thin lentil curry, usually rice, some kind of papadum, and another dry curry on the side. Sometimes it has other components too. It's like a thali plate with the lentil curry being like the main star. My dinner was incredible, as dal bhat often is. Danielle, however, ordered a vegetable pizza, which apparently wasn't quite as good as my dal bhat. We got to bed pretty early, maybe around 10 p.m, because we intended on getting up early the next day. Before going to bed, we did order our breakfast for the next day, which is usually the norm in these tea houses, especially when you're the only one staying there. We also gave them a time, and we said we would be up and ready for breakfast at 8 a.m. Day 2, we woke up and the weather had cleared considerably, and we were treated to some of our first glimpses of the Annapurna range before breakfast. As well as these enormous snow-covered mountains, we also got to see the rice terraces below, as well as the town of Landruk, which is the place we had originally intended on starting our trek if we had been able to get the shared jeep from Pokhara. For breakfast, we both ordered a pancake, which cost us 400 rupees each. Danielle got a banana pancake and I got an apple pancake, and they were both delicious. We also ordered a black coffee each, which set us back 150 rupees each. The friendly cat from yesterday did harass Danielle for her pancake for about 5 minutes, which was really fun to watch. And eventually the owner had to come over and pick him up and take him outside because he wouldn't leave her alone. So Danielle got to eat her pancake in peace, which was pretty funny. After finishing our pancakes, we went back to our room, packed up our stuff, used the relax room one last time, and took in the incredible views from the patio of this tea house before grabbing our backpacks and managing to hit the trail at 9 a.m. The next part of the trek was through more of this thick, luscious forest that we walked through last night. This was honestly so cool to walk through, with all the moss hanging off of the trees and all of the vines hanging across the branches. It kind of felt like an enchanted forest and felt a lot like the forests of the Pacific Northwest and Olympic National Park in the US. About 1.5 hours after leaving the tea house we spent the night at, we did pass by another 2 tea houses on the trail that weren't marked on any of the maps that we had seen.
Okay, so we stayed at Greenview Hotel, and then in between there and Forest Camp, an hour and a half hiking from where we stayed, there's 2 more guest houses. So if you've got more juice in the tank and it's early, you can go for another hour and a half and there's somewhere else before Forest Camp. So you haven't got to commit to Forest Camp.
This first part of our day was pretty flat for the first few hours and was slightly uphill the whole way, but nothing considerable or too difficult. And after a total of around 2.5 hours of hiking, just before reaching Forest Camp, the forest opened up to some more views of the valley below us, and we got a few more sneak peeks at the rice terraces in the foothills below the ridge we were walking on. And shortly after, we reached Forest Camp at an elevation of 2,500 meters above sea level. Forest Camp is one of 3 main camps along the Mardi Himal trekking route, and this is the first one that trekkers come across whilst on their hike up. The 2 other camps are Low Camp and High Camp. And these camps are essentially small towns or villages along the trekking route that cater to trekkers making their way up towards Mardi Himal Base Camp. Each one has a number of tea houses or guest houses, which serve as both a place to sleep at night and as restaurants serving breakfast, lunch, and dinner. The trail goes right through each of these camps, and you will literally pass by the door of most of these tea houses. We decided we were going to stop for lunch at one of these tea houses and chose to go with the last tea house we passed right at the top of the camp, Hotel Greenland. And from up here, there was a great view over Forest Camp below, and it also meant we were closer to the trail once we'd eaten our lunch and started to trek again. At Forest Camp, we both ordered a cup of ginger tea for 100 rupees each, and for lunch we both had vegetable noodles again for 480 rupees each. These huge plates of noodles came fully loaded with a variety of different vegetables and were absolutely delicious. So straight after lunch, the trek goes from a nice flat walk through the woods and directly into a very steep uphill hike over hundreds of stone steps as soon as you leave Forest Camp. This part of the trek between Forest Camp and Low Camp was definitely one of the harder sections and took us around 3 hours to complete. The forest was obviously very beautiful though, with dozens of lovely wildflowers around the forest and along the trail, which kept us entertained as we walked up through the forest. The weather did take a bit of a turn halfway through this section and it did start to rain on us.
Okay, so we left lunch about an hour ago at Forest Camp and then it started raining, so I've had to fashion a makeshift rain poncho thing. This bag didn't come with a rain cover and it's not mine, it's a rental. So thank God I brought my pack Mac. Looking snazzy. So our plan is that we're hoping we're about an hour and a half from Low Camp. It has been pretty steep, so we've been going pretty slow. It looks like it's not as bad now because it was steps, but yeah, we've got to get a wiggle on because I don't know how well this rain poncho will work.
Luckily though, it didn't last too long and it didn't rain too heavy, so we didn't actually get that wet. The rain and the mist kind of added to the atmosphere of this mossy forest, so we actually kind of really enjoyed this part. It also meant it was much cooler walking up these steep steps, which helped us a lot. So we did this trek at the end of February / the beginning of March last year, so it wasn't too hot yet. We did it around that time because we were told that there was no snow at the top of the trek, and that the weather would be good for trekking as it wasn't super hot in the foothills at this time of year. Just before reaching Low Camp, we encountered a big herd of yaks grazing in the forest beside the trail. These yaks are what help carry supplies up the trails and to the tea houses at the camps further up. When we did Everest Base Camp a couple of years ago, we encountered so many giant trains of yaks going up and down the mountain paths dozens of times a day. And on the Mardi Himal trek though, we had yet to encounter any at all. After a few hours of trekking since Forest Camp, we make it to Low Camp where we will be spending the night. We choose a tea house at random and we pay 800 rupees for one room for one night. Again, the room is super basic, as are most rooms along this trek, with no electricity and just a few beds and blankets with no other furniture. Maybe because of the time of year, we're the only people staying at this tea house again, just like last night. Because it is a little early in the hiking season, there is not a lot of other trekkers around, especially when compared to a trek like Everest Base Camp where there is hundreds and hundreds of trekkers. After unpacking our bags and changing into our warmer clothes, we leave our stuff in the room and make our way to the dining room of the tea house, where we share a pot of ginger tea for 380 rupees. Again, because the fire is lit in the dining room, it makes it much warmer in here than in our room, which is very, very cold by now. So we just sit in here and relax. We read our books for a couple of hours and drink our tea. At one point we do get a little bit cold and decide to go and sit around the fire to warm up, which is definitely a very common thing to do on these treks in Nepal. For dinner, we both order a vegetable curry with rice for 600 rupees each, which also comes with a little papadom and some pickle or chutney and a slice of radish. The food does tend to take a little while to be prepared when you're staying at these tea houses, simply because everything is made from scratch. So everything is super fresh and delicious, but it's worth ordering a little while before you're hungry just to give them enough time to prepare and cook it for you. After dinner, we read our books some more and we once again go to bed early around 10 p.m. so that we can wake up nice and early for tomorrow. Waking up on day 3, we are again really lucky with the weather and we have beautiful blue clear skies all around us. And from here at Low Camp, we have our very first glimpse of Machu Picchu, which is one of the most iconic mountains in this region and is also known as Fishtail Mountain because of its unique shape. Last night the temperature must have got down pretty low because there is also a fresh layer of frost covering the entire ground. The views of Machu Picchu from here are awesome, and we feel really blessed to have such clear weather this morning, as seeing these impressive mountains is one of the main reasons for us wanting to do the Mardi Himal trek. For breakfast we have 2 black coffees for 130 rupees each, and we both order a banana pancake for 385 rupees. These pancakes are always really big and super filling, so they're a really good choice on a trek like this. I should also probably mention that the coffee on these treks in Nepal is always just Nescafe instant stuff, so it's not terribly good, but it does the job and gets you your morning caffeine. After eating our pancakes, we head back to our room to pack up our belongings into our backpack and get on the trail whilst the sun is still out. The trek up towards high camp starts again with some relentlessly steep stone steps through the forest, much like the trail into low camp yesterday afternoon. This part of the trek is very steep, but the views of the Annapurna range and the beautiful sunshine keeps our spirits very high. The colourful prayer flags between the trees reminds us of the vibrant culture in these hills and feels much like the trek up to Everest Base Camp. As it's still only early March, there is still a layer of snow covering most of these tall peaks around us. And as we push further up the steep trail, we are rewarded with even more incredible views of the Annapurna range and Machu Picchu. However, as we reach the top of our first steep climb of the day, Badao Danda at 3,300 meters in elevation, we begin to notice the cloud that is steadily rolling in towards us and the ridge that we are going to climb along today to reach high camp this afternoon. Needless to say, we take a few moments to take in this insane view before the clouds completely cover our view of Machu Picchu. From here we can make out exactly where the trail goes, past the blue roof tea houses and along the ridge in front of us, steadily climbing uphill. But before we can meet the ridge, we descend steeply back down a ways through the tree before climbing back up. At this point I'm almost certain that the thick wall of cloud to our right is headed straight for us, and we decide to simply power on through this next portion of the trek in order to get to high camp before we are completely engulfed in the cloud. Even though it doesn't look too bad in some of these clips, we've spent enough time in the mountains to know that the weather can change really quickly, and I'm pretty certain that this cloud is headed our way. So we just keep on climbing these steep stairs without really giving ourselves any breaks, just so that we can give ourselves a better chance at beating the bad weather and getting to high camp before it rolls in. On the way, we meet our first mule train of this trek, making their way back down from high camp. As usual, we pass many tea houses on this section of the trek leading into high camp, so there is always the option to stay at one if the weather turns bad before we actually reach high camp. Some of these tea houses aren't actually open yet though, because it is only the beginning of March, and most trekkers won't arrive until mid to late March and beyond. The closer we get to high camp, the worse the cloud gets, and as we walk along some of these ridges, we can really see how fast the wind is moving the cloud in our direction, which is actually kind of really awesome to see. Around a kilometre from high camp, we are completely surrounded by a thick moving cloud, and we are super grateful to be so close as the cloud reaches us, because it gets really cold in the cloud, and we are convinced it is either about to rain really hard or snow really heavy. It was actually kind of terrifying walking along these paths on the side of the mountain and just seeing thick cloud below. Like, you obviously know there is a massive drop off just 1 foot to your right, but it's so eerie not knowing how far down it goes or where it ends. So obviously we took our time on this last part, because one trip can be really bad here, and there's a lot of loose tiles and stones on the path. We reach high camp and we are immediately greeted by this really cute dog as we walk towards the first guest house at the edge of high camp. He actually ends up following us the whole way through high camp, which was really cute, but then as we chose a tea house for the night, the owner actually shooed him away, which was kind of sad. As usual, we didn't have any idea which tea house to choose. We just walked most of the way through the town and then settled on a nice looking one near the edge of the camp. To be honest, we couldn't really see too far in front of us by this point, so we didn't actually know if there were any other guest houses past here, so that's why we chose this one. The tea house we ended up picking was called Hotel Magic Mountain and ended up being really nice. The room cost us 1,000 rupees for the night, which was the most expensive room so far, but as we were at the highest elevation of the trek, we were definitely expecting it. Because we walked this last section without stopping in order to beat the impending bad weather, we actually arrived here pretty early in the afternoon, so we decided to order some momos for our lunch. I think we ordered 1 plate of potato and cheese momos and 1 plate of vegetable momos to share, and they were absolutely delicious. I really love momos. I would literally travel back to Nepal just for the momos. That green and red sauce concoction there is a mixture of ketchup and a spicy green sauce that seems to be everywhere in both Nepal and India, and was once simply described to me as Indian ketchup at a restaurant in Agra in India. So that's what we always always just refer to it as, but I personally love it. We sat in the dining room as the wind picked up even more and the cloud thickened around us. You can see how bad the wind gets behind us with the prayer flags flapping around like crazy. And after about an hour of sitting in the dining room and playing cards and drinking tea, the snow finally arrived and began to fall. With the strong wind and the snow, we were really grateful to be inside in the warm and not outside still hiking in this weather. We also began to wonder how deep the snow might get, as we literally had no clue that this snow was coming and that it might mean that we can't hike all the way up to Mardi Himal Base Camp tomorrow, as we didn't bring any crampons or ice cleats. Anyway, it carried on snowing for a few hours and it eventually got a bit heavier. The snow was a weird consistency though, kind of like hard balls of ice, like dipping dots almost. Not like the fluffy wet stuff that you usually see. It did start to settle on the ground and the trail and the roofs and stuff, and it did accumulate quite a bit, so we were starting to get worried about continuing further up tomorrow. The only thing we could really do was just to wait and see what was in store in the morning, so we just played some more cards, we drank some more tea, then we ate our dinner before heading to bed. I got dal bhat again because it's definitely my favourite, and Danielle got a classic staple, vegetable noodles. After eating, we went to bed and we set our alarm really early for sunrise the next day. As soon as we opened our bedroom door in the morning of day 4, we were greeted with the bright orange glow of sunrise all the way across the valley in front of us, which was such a beautiful sight to see. The sun wasn't quite up yet, which meant that the sky was an amazing orangey colour along the tops of the mountains, and the mountains behind us were just about to be lit up by the sun coming up over the hills. The snow wasn't super deep, which meant we would definitely try and get up to one of the viewpoints to watch the sun come up. We definitely would have preferred to have some crampons with us for walking in the snow, especially after the sun was up. But whilst it was still cold, we still felt pretty comfortable walking up the trail a little ways with our hiking shoes. The views from up here were just absolutely incredible, the best we had seen yet by far. Every direction we looked was just amazing, with Machu Picchu right in front of us, the Annapurnas to our left, and the sun rising over the foothills to our right. The trail took us up some steep stairs and along a path right on the edge of a mountain, so we were definitely not prepared to be hiking along here once the sun had been up a while and the snow had turned slippery after it had melted in the sun. Luckily though, as we walked up, the sun had just started to light up the top of Machu Picchu, which turned it a really stunning orange colour. These views were honestly so incredible, and I just don't think the clips are doing it justice at all. We were so glad to have hiked up here for this and to have woken up so early to catch such an amazing sunrise. And we were also so grateful that the weather was so clear that morning so that we could see the whole valley and watch the sun light up the peaks around us. Down in the valleys did look pretty hazy from up here, but at this elevation we were really lucky and we got some really clear visibility. We ended up hiking to a small viewpoint that looked over High Camp and got there just as the sun peaked up over the mountains. We stopped here and soaked in the views for a little while, watching as the mountains slowly became more and more illuminated. We had almost 360-degree views of the valleys and the peaks around us, and we just took a little bit of time to appreciate it and soak it all in. We began descending the stairs back down toward High Camp before the sun became warm enough to start melting the snow. We were both a bit gutted about not being able to go any further, but we were also very satisfied with the incredible views we had witnessed from that first viewpoint. It would have been amazing to head further up the trail and onto Mardi Himal Base Camp, but we knew that the snow would only get deeper as we headed up in elevation, and we just weren't prepared for it. When we got back to our tea house, the owner told us that it wouldn't be a good idea to try and head up to base camp due to the snow, so we felt pretty comfortable with our decision. Instead, we spent a little bit of time around the tea house and we watched the owners perform a small Buddhist ritual on the hill next to the guest house, and we just soaked in the sunshine as the snow melted off the roofs around us and lit up the mountains. We headed into the dining room and got ourselves a Nescafe coffee for 180 rupees each, and today for breakfast I decided that I was going to go wild and get something new. Well, not something entirely new, as I had pretty much eaten it every day when we trekked up to Everest Base Camp a couple of years ago. I opted for Tibetan bread for breakfast, which if you've never had it before, I can only really describe it as like a savoury donut. It's like a big fried piece of doughy bread, but it's really good. That set me back 370 rupees, and Danielle got an apple pancake for 420 rupees. After our breakfast, we did of course head back into our room to pack away our things into our backpacks so that we could begin our descent all the way back down towards Kandy. Also, these mules were really cute and just sat there basking in the sun all day, and a big group of Singaporean tourists were also at this tea house with us, and they all went and took selfies with the mules, which was absolutely adorable to watch. As we began our descent, we went pretty slowly because of the snow. Neither of us had had a lot of experience hiking in the snow when we did this trek, so we were kind of afraid of slipping and falling down these stairs or off the edge of the mountain. I will say though that after living in Canada since then, I'm kind of laughing at how careful careful and nervous we were, because it really just looks like a little sprinkle of snow in these clips. But at the time, it really did feel quite treacherous. After a little bit of walking, we could see that the snow ended a little further down, so we knew that we would only need to walk a few more kilometers in the snow. It turned out that the snow only really went from just below high camp and up, so if we'd stayed any lower, then we wouldn't have known about the snow until we'd walked further up the trail in the morning. But after an hour or so of walking, the snow did eventually thin out quite a bit, and we were able to pick up the pace a little bit. We were also very keen to get down to lower elevation before too much cloud formed around this area again, because we weren't sure if there was going to be more snow or more bad weather, and we just wanted to get down before it potentially started raining on us. We didn't really have a specific goal in mind for that night, and we were both happy to just keep walking all the way back down where we'd come from and just see how far we got before we both became tired. We did intend on getting to at least forest camp though, as we were just aiming to walk back to the main road where we'd gotten the taxi to in Kandy on day one, and we were just planning on hoping there were taxis in that area to get back to Pokhara once we did arrive. We did know that we wouldn't be able to make it all the way there today though, so we were just going to see how close we could get today and then finish the rest of it in the morning. The views on this section of the trek were just so unbelievably picturesque, and we were grateful to be able to see them today, as the clouds had completely obscured our views along this ridge yesterday. There was a lot of haze down on the foothills still, but the visibility up here was still amazing, and we even got a few sneaky glimpses of the rice terraces below us, which gave another depth to the diversity of the views in this region. A few hours later, we passed back through low camp and entered back into the moss-covered forest, passing the tea house we had stayed at 2 nights ago. Once we reached forest camp, we were pretty hungry, so we stopped back at the same place we did on the way up the hill, and we ordered some lunch and some tea. By now, the clouds were really surrounding us, so the temperature was dropping and we were feeling the cold a little bit. Just like last time, we both ordered a ginger tea, and for lunch we both had veg noodles again, literally because they were so good the first time around and we couldn't not get them again. We sat outside with our giant pot of ginger tea and enjoyed our noodles looking down over forest camp. At this point, we were pretty sure that we were going to keep walking further down the trail and probably stay at the same place we had the first night, Hotel Greenview. This would have meant that we could get up early and reach the road in Kandy by the early morning and get a taxi into Pokhara. However, as we were walking through forest camp, it did actually start to rain, so we ended up coming to a decision that we should probably just spend the night at forest camp and cover the extra couple hours of walking in the morning. As usual, we ended up picking our tea house for the night at random. We just ended up settling on the last one out of forest camp, the tea house at the very bottom of the camp by the trail. We paid for our room, which was only 500 rupees, half of what the room cost last night at high camp. After dropping our bags off at our little room, we then headed into the dining area, where we mostly just read our ebooks and just enjoyed the warmth of the fire. For dinner, we both had veg curry with rice, which cost us 550 rupees each. The morning of day 5, we woke up and headed straight into the dining room for breakfast. I ordered the Tibetan bread again for 300 rupees, which I covered in honey, and I also convinced Danielle to order Tibetan bread too, because she was kind of getting sick of pancakes by now. Of course, we also ordered a much needed black coffee for 120 rupees each. After breakfast, we went and packed up our backpacks for the last time on this trek, and as you can see, Danielle is pretty excited to head back into town and have a shower and do laundry. The general practice at these tea houses is to pay when you leave in the morning, so you don't usually pay as you order things like breakfast or dinner or tea, but the owner will keep a tally of everything you've had, so that when you check out and hand them the padlock key in the morning, you just pay for everything that you've ordered and you pay for your room. So after paying our bill, we hit the trail. The clouds were already surrounding us this morning, so the trail through the forest was super eerie and foggy, which was so beautiful. It almost felt like a fairy tale forest as we walked along the cobbled path through the mossy trees. We also stumbled across this extremely friendly and excited dog as we headed through the misty forest, and he followed us around for a little while, running up and down between the two of us. That's definitely one thing that you see a lot of if you do a trek in Nepal, and that's the friendly dogs along the trail and in the towns and the camps along the way. These dogs don't really belong to anyone, and they end up traveling up and down the trail as they make their way between the villages, following the porters and guides as they walk up. Sometimes they'll follow you along the trail for hours, just running up ahead and back again as you slowly walk behind them. It's really quite cute, and for the most part they are all really friendly. So after walking through the foggy forest below forest camp for a couple of hours, we ended up passing back through the town of Pitam Durrailie, a town after Australia camp that we passed through on day 1 and stopped and got tea at after our lunch. Now apparently I didn't record any of this, but we basically ended up running into some of the guides that were with the group of Singaporeans that stayed at high camp with us the night before. And they were basically getting a jeep out of the town and into Pokhara. And they said to us, they recognized us as we walked past, and they were like, hey, you going to Pokhara? And we were like, yeah, we're going to walk to the road in Kandy. And they said that they had 2 spare seats in their Jeep and that it would only cost us 1,000 rupees each all the way into Lakeside in Pokhara. So we said yes, of course. The Jeep was literally leaving as we walked past, so it was really, really incredible timing. So we both paid 1,000 rupees each to get back to Pokhara, which saved us a couple of hours hiking to Kandy and the possibility of not being able to find a taxi straight away. And we knew that the taxi from Pokhara to Kandy on day 1 had cost us 2,000 rupees, so it was going to be the same price anyway. So we jumped in the Jeep with about 5 other people and went down this really, really bumpy road, which was a little bit sketchy, I'm not going to lie, but it eventually met with the main road and took us into Pokhara. We actually got to pass by some of the local villages on the way, which was a nice little glimpse into local life for us. The Jeep dropped us off in Lakeside and we just walked to our hotel, which was about 20 minutes away. It was pretty good luck for us that we ran into this group when we did, but from what the guides were saying, if you do want to get a Jeep from one of these towns, you can just pay for the whole Jeep regardless of how many people there are, which I think was about 7,000 rupees. So that's it. Thank you for watching. Make sure you hit the like button if you got anything out of this video, and check out our channel for other videos around travel content and trekking in Nepal, and I will see you in the next one.